everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to Perry Worldhouse. My name is Michael Horowitz and I am Richard Perry Professor and the Faculty Director here. Perry Worldhouse is Penn's hub for global engagement. We bridge the gap between academia and the global policy world, including by fostering international policy engagement within and beyond the Penn community. What better way to do that than by bringing world leaders here to share their views and experiences? We're really excited to have a special event for you here today. And to introduce it, it's my great pleasure to introduce the Provost of the University of Pennsylvania, John Jackson. He's Penn's 31st Provost and a pioneering scholar of urban ethnography, visual culture, and the anthropology of race. He's the only professor in Penn history to serve as Dean of two Penn schools, the Annenberg School of Communication and the School of Public Policy and Practice. He's been a tremendous leader for the community and of the university and supporter of Perry Worldhouse. So it's my great pleasure to welcome Provost Jackson on stage to introduce today's event. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad you're here. We're excited that you're joining us for what I know will be a fascinating discussion. So before we start, very quickly, I want to take a second to acknowledge Perry Worldhouse and thank them for hosting this really important event for us today. Now, to frame this discussion, I want to start with a quotation. Diplomacy isn't about winning a fight. It's about building a bridge when everyone wants to burn it down. Now, some of you might recognize those words as coming not from statesman and Ambassador Benjamin Franklin, but from the Ambassador Kate Weiler of Netflix's The Diplomat show. Now, while fiction, I think it's still a fairly apt description of our real-world geopolitical challenges, trying to forge a difficult path forward for the US and Europe, for the Middle East, for Europe and Russia, China, and everywhere else. If alliances are, in fact, bridges, they seem to crumble with distressing regularity. In particular, the Transatlantic Partnership, which dates back at least to the end of the Second World War, has entered worrisome new territory, with many democracies currently under threat and even backsliding toward autocracy. Few people have had firsthand experience working at the highest levels of diplomacy and democracy, and fewer still hold doctorates while doing so and are also well-regarded scholars and authors. We're very fortunate to have two of those people with us here this afternoon. Our discussion features our honored guest, Robert Habeck, in conversation with Penn's own Amy Gutmann. Neither one, honestly, needs an introduction, but I'm here and on stage, so I'll give you a brief one for each one. So Mr. Habeck served as Vice Chancellor of Germany from 2021 to May of this year. Before that, he was Federal Minister for Economic Affairs and Climate Action in the cabinet of the Chancellor Olaf Scholz, as well as member of the German Bundestag. From 2018 to 2022, he also served as leader of the Greens, that's Germany's environmental party, the country's third largest by membership. He is also the author or co-author with his wife of numerous published works across several genres, including thrillers, political commentary, plays, and children's books. Last month, he began teaching and doing research at the Danish Institute for International Studies in Copenhagen and at the University of California, Berkeley. He holds a doctorate in philosophy from the University of Hamburg. And he will be in conversation with Amy Gutmann, who served as U.S. Ambassador to Germany from 2022 to 2024, and of course, President Emerita right now of Penn, where she served as president from 2004 to 2022, the university's 8th and longest serving president. Prior to that, she was provost and professor at Princeton University. Ambassador Gutmann is a prize-winning scholar of political science who has published and lectured widely on democracy and education, compromise and diplomacy, bioethics, and healthcare. Among other honors and leadership appointments, she chaired President Obama's Presidential Commission for the Study of Bioethics for 7 years, and at Penn, she's currently our Christopher H. Brown Distinguished Professor of Political Science in the School of Arts and Sciences and Professor of Communication in the Annenberg School for Communication. Please join me in welcoming our two esteemed guests.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, thank you, John, for those warm introductions, and thank you all for being here, and thank you, Richard Perry, without whom we wouldn't be at Perry World House, so thank you all. We're here with Robert Habeck. I'm just thrilled to be here, and we're going to have a conversation. This is called a fireside chat, so just imagine a fire blazing here. It's blazing within us, right, Robert? So the general topic is the transatlantic relation, and this is an opportunity, Robert, for me to turn the transatlantic tables, turn the table, and welcome you as warmly as you welcome me. I want to welcome you to my country, to my city, to my university, and to Perry World House. So let's welcome Robert Habeck again. But we're going to have a conversation about the transatlantic relationship. So I want to begin where we began, when we first met. As I recall very vividly, it was just before, when I became ambassador at least, it was barely 2 weeks before Russia brutally reinvaded Ukraine, February 24th, 2022. And my mission as ambassador, very high up in my mission, there was no goal that was greater than, as President Biden's representative, highest representative in Germany, to convince all of you that this was going to happen, that Germany's dependence on Russian energy was a very big mistake, and Nord Stream 2 had to be axed, and that Germany needed to build up its military to help support security in Europe. And then I learned very quickly, Robert, that you had already said all of these things. And that was my introduction to Robert Habeck, that you already had not only said it, but you were developing plans for this. So do you remember those times? And what do you think now about those times and how important the US-German relationship felt to us then?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, and thanks for the generosity I experienced over the last 3.5 weeks. And you said now welcome, but actually it's like, I think it's the last time I'm sitting on this stage, and it was a great, great experience. And it would not happen, and this is the bridge to what you asked, if we haven't met before. So actually the story is that Amy was ambassador in Germany, and I mean, this was now the top of politics, at least in Germany, and sometimes you meet people and you trust them immediately. This has nothing to do with professionality and getting along, but sometimes you feel there's really connection, and so it felt. And whatever I like to forget about being in politics so long, these days and these weeks I will never forget. It was so. What is the right word? So intense, maybe deep, because for Germany this was just a deep threat. I think some of you know that we were completely unprepared for everything that happened. We relied heavily on Russian gas, and this was pipeline-bound gas, so you could not replace it. Like if the US would stop delivering LNG gas to Germany, then maybe we could go to the Qataris, but we didn't at that time even LNG ports, so it was impossible to get alternatives into the country, and nobody was really thinking about it actually. So I have one. It was all intense, but one vivid memory, and this was. It must have been the second time we met, because there was a trust already established, but we couldn't figure out when the first time was actually. But I remember that your former was it Secretary for Trade or what? Catherine Tai was visiting Germany, and Amy and her staff was with her in the ministry. And when we said goodbye to each other, you pointed to one of your staff members, and he stepped up to me and said, "Robert, tonight it's going to happen. Tonight Russia will invade Ukraine." And he gave me an envelope. And you have to know that the German Secret Service was completely on the other side. So until the invasion happened, the German Secret Service always advised us, me, the Chancellor, and everyone, they will never do it. They're just playing. This is just a game. So,
and by the way, just so you understand, almost nobody thought this was going to happen except the US government, and we had actually shared the intelligence, but our intelligence has been wrong in the past, but we were absolutely confident. We had the highest degree of confidence that this was going to happen. We just didn't know what day it was going to happen. It was going to happen
And that
soon.
evening you said, it's tonight, and you gave me this envelope, like very old-fashioned, like a spy movie in a way. And they're saying, now we look at the pictures, they are defreezing their blood conserves, they are painting these mirrored Z on their tanks, they have opened the warheads of their missiles. It's going to be tonight. And the thing was, I was on my way to a talk show in television about everything, and I knew with all this information that I'm sitting here now, and I have to do this silly talking, and tomorrow the world would be completely different. Yeah. And it was really, really hard to emotionally to manage the situation. And then I think on my way back, I informed the Chancellor that I got this information, and so we looked at our mobile phones the whole of the night. But this was like that you shared this information with me was so incredible, and it was incredibly important, because then I could act in the morning, and I knew I should visit the Ukrainians, and did so. But this was maybe just one small incident why I'm here, actually, because we worked well together, and you trusted me from the very beginning.
But that trust, even though it was very high between us because of what Robert had already shown, you had not just said it, but you showed that you were an incredibly reliable ally for us in the government. So it was not only personal, it was also political. The importance of our relationship was so palpable to me. I'll tell you, this is where, for those of you who watch The Diplomat, truth is better and sometimes stranger than fiction. Better or worse, in this case, even more dramatically worse. But it was, we strengthened the US-German relationship because of the fact that we could trust people like Robert. And Robert was, because of what he had already said, was just so clearly an ally. But I remember, even after that, how one day I was visiting your office, And whenever we visit each other, we have entourages, right? And there are a lot of people surrounding Robert in his office and a lot of people surrounding me. And besides what the actual stated purpose of this meeting was, which there was, and I don't remember it.
Must be about energy.
Energy, probably
issues,
energy,
guess,
which you had a real plan for, and it was incredibly important. But I had a piece of intelligence that I wanted to give to Robert really quite urgently. But I also had reason to believe that I might not be able to trust all the people in the room, because I didn't know all of them. There may have been some other reasons too, but we'll leave those aside. So I whispered to Robert, can we talk? Do you want, I have some information. And without missing a beat, he said, come with me. And we actually walked out on a balcony.
And we left the staff
We
sitting at the
left
table.
everybody's-
That was the embarrassing thing, I think, for them.
Yes.
Because, I mean, there's a reason that the entourage is always there. They're taking notes. So when the ambassador of the United States is saying, I don't know, we do an appointment for you at this or that time, then it's like an order. So someone has to take notes. It's not forgotten. And the same, if a minister is saying we want to do this or that, then someone has to keep the notes that this is that the line of consequences will be closely mirrored. Leaving these people sitting in the room and say, okay, now the interesting stuff is not for you. Well, I think they looked a little bit disappointed, you can say this.
Yeah, but so I can't tell you what I shared because otherwise, as the saying goes, I'd have to kill you. But I can tell you that it was what Russia's plans were, not about Ukraine, but with regard to Germany, and really violent plans, which Germany could head off by knowing about them. And we did that all the time. Not every day, but every time we had critical information, which Germany also had sometimes that we needed to know. So that, to me, brought the personal into the political about why our relationship and trust was so important. I don't know if you want to fast forward to today and whether you're worried about that trust. Yes.
We only share the stories of the past. And,
So let me ask you.
Nice for us.
Yes.
Indulging in memories, but maybe what is, of course, is now directly on the table is, would the same happen right now? Is it imaginable that in a similar situation, the same connection between other people would be possible? And I doubt it, actually. I doubt that due to the political circumstances, I don't know how far I should get on this, but you can see in these small incidents, these tiny memories, how important it is that, from my perspective as a German and European politician, how important it is that the United States and Europe work close together. And not only professional together, but really trust each other, at least on some level. And now, from the European side, maybe you can comment on it. I have to say that this trust is, maybe it's not broken, but it is not intact. So I doubt that this could happen a second time.
So let me ask you a question that we take for granted the answer to, but I think we can't take it for granted. At the time, back then, there was a bipartisan view that it was incredibly important. It was incredibly important for the US and Germany both to staunchly support Ukraine against Putin. Ukraine, democracy. Putin, autocracy. Ukraine, an ally of ours. Putin, not. And that was just on both sides of the aisle. There was an incredible agreement on that. The disagreements were on how to do it, how much we could afford to do, how much we wanted Germany to do. Today, that agreement no longer exists in our country. So I'm asking you, why is it important?
So
I mean, we take it for granted, but why? Why shouldn't this just be a matter of power politics?
Well, I can't answer without sharing a personal story once again, but I will come to the political part in a minute or so. When you visit Kiev, there's the Euromaidan place, the big place where even before the 2022 war, in the months and weeks of the Euromaidan, where young students, young people were protesting for, I would say, for their future, for their freedom, for making their own decision, but actually for belonging to Europe, that Ukraine should be part of the European Union in the end, were shot. They were camping there, they were protesting there, they were singing there, and about 100 people were shot by Ukrainian, Russian paid maybe snipers from the hotel. So you see this place, and you suddenly understand physically that this battle, now the battle at the Ukraine border, the Russian invasion, what it's about. It's about not letting that happen. So it's about freedom in the end, about, yes, we always say the sovereignty of a country and rule of law, of course, but in the end, what is rule of law meaning and what is the sense behind it? It's that people can decide about their future and their life and their government and their country in a free and liberal society. And this is what the people of Ukraine, the young people mainly, are willing to die for. They actually died for this. And when you stand there and you go home to Germany and Europe, suddenly all this talk about, yes, but we should not provoke Russia, and yes, Ukraine is the forefront of the European Union, is just talk. So then the question is, how could we help them? I mean, they're dying there, and we do talk shows. That's not a match, I would say. And so I was really, for me, actually, when you travel as a politician, I have to answer your question, I know, but sometimes it makes sense to go abroad. So for me, two countries, or being in two countries, really changed my view. That one is Israel, obviously, and the one is being in Ukraine. It makes a difference being there, understanding how the town of Kiev is vibrant, what the people want, what they feel, and how much they will suffer to achieve this. And so that is the reason why I think either we shut up or we help them. It's about defending freedom, their freedom, but in the end, the European, and I would say, the freedom that is the reason for the world order we established in the past years. So for obvious reasons, for Germany, this is a hard debate. We started 2 world wars, always against Russia. For people in Germany, it's hard to imagine that German tanks are fighting the Russian army because of our dark and bloody and disastrous history. So I understand that it's difficult for my country, men and women, to follow this debate, but then you have to make a decision. Either you lose yourself in the history, or you see what's happening on the ground. So I always advocated to make this decision, but to be honest, the German army has not the capability to do really much. So we need at that time the European alliance and especially the Americans. Until now, I think I would say we're doing better. Now, at least there's a defense package that is heavily spending into our own defense capabilities. The Ukraine is part of that. That's wisely done, but it will take some time. So if the US is saying, while we withdraw from the immediate help for Ukraine, it is quite a challenge for Europe. Germany has the financial power, but maybe not the capacity to produce as many ammunition and drones and whatever the Ukraine has, but they need support. But this, I mean, I would say maybe in 5 years' time or 3 years' time, if we are really speeding up, we can compensate a little bit of the lack that America is now creating, but not now.
Yeah,
so it's really, the support is really missing. And now going back to my story, that means we leave the people more or less alone.
Yeah.
The young people that suffered and died for so many reasons.
Yeah. No, I agree, although I have a harder time making sense of our country's lack now of a guiding policy with regard to autocracy versus democracy. Even if you just take a practical power perspective on this, our friends are not Putin. And I, like you, have devoted my life and my family history is all about the importance of freedom and democracy, right? And those are very abstract terms until something like Ukraine happens or Hamas's terrorist attack on Israel on October 7th, 2023. I don't know how many of you know this or have watched it, but 50 million, over 50 million people worldwide have watched Robert Habeck's statement, which he put on video after Hamas enacted the worst terrorist attack, the worst attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And what Robert said in that video, he said many things, but the thing that stood out to me and resonated most with me as ambassador to Germany and as a person whose father fled Nazi Germany was he said, Israel's right to defend itself is the reason of state, the reason of being for Germany. In other words, if Israel doesn't have a right to defend itself and to be a democracy, then Germany doesn't. And I want to ask you whether you're, let me ask a very practical question. When 9/11, about NATO, because we have to, I want to get off of Ukraine, and when 9/11 happened, NATO lost no time, and every member of NATO stood behind invoking Article 5, the Mutual Defense Pact, that all of NATO would come to the defense of the US. How confident are you now today, if there were an attack on Europe, that that would hold, especially for the United States?
Well, how confident are you? So, but I can answer this.
I can't be.
It is, for me, it's related or interlinked with the Ukraine question, because I think that the strategy in Ukraine, not member of NATO, and what's happening at the eastern, maybe northeastern NATO flank is more or less the same. So if you look to the rhetoric, to these, we call it always hybrid warfare, and maybe this is a little bit difficult word because it sounds so fuzzy, so could be not. I think it's a strategy. It's obviously a strategy provoking small incidents and testing out what's happening. And out of these small incidents, of course, suddenly something really bad, like the next battlefield could evoke. And then this is NATO territory, I'm afraid. I think the most European politicians, including myself, would say Article 5 is a litmus test, and it's intact. until now. So
It definitely
if you
is
say,
intact.
well, you never know, but maybe now, Robert, you have to answer, do you believe it's intact? Is NATO holding? I would say this morning, I said, yes, it is. So we have to believe that it is intact, otherwise NATO does not make any sense. The thing is that two things have changed in the broader scope. When I was a young man, everyone in Germany, I guess in Europe, believed NATO is for the US, it's for America. We are, in a way, they have American troops on German soil, that's good for us, they are securing our safety, fine, but really America wanted to be NATO, their powerhouse. This is an American thing, and yes, because of our history, we welcome them and we help them, but it's an American thing. Now, every European thinks the Americans are someone unreliable, but we want NATO. So now all the European leaders, including, I'm not a leader anymore, but the European politicians would say, well, we want to have NATO functioning and being in place. And the second thing happened, because I think it's the same, but it's the downside of it. Everyone in Europe trusted the Americans when NATO was undoubtedly an American interest. Now it's not the case anymore, and this really creates now on the ground new decisions.
But it is still in the American interest, isn't it? I mean, I
yes,
believe.
For various reasons it should be, because
it is.
you see what's happening in Europe. There are a lot of right-wing populistic parties on the rising in the European countries, and if some of them are really repeating Russian propaganda, I have to say it in this way. So imagine that Europe would be governed by at least some more right-wing parties, hopefully not all of them, but imagine like Hungary is like 5 places more or 10 places more in Europe, then you have Russian propaganda at the Atlantic. So then there's only the water between America and Europe. So yes, it should be in the American interest, as it's good for you to be on both sides of the Atlantic and have troops there. So
could I just interrupt for a second just to say what, on the American side, I think it would be a profound mistake, and it is a profound mistake for the US not to see it in our interests for the reasons you've given. I also think it's important, and it's a good thing, that Europe now firmly sees it in its interest, and that this is not an alliance just made by the Americans for the Americans, right? That is a really good thing, but we need to have it mutual. So we need to get that both sides of the Atlantic, which goes back to why the Transatlantic alliance is so important.
So I'd like to share one, maybe you know about it because this is Perry World House and everything is about global politics and you are following the European news closely, I guess. But for the ones not, I think the truest ally you had in Europe was Denmark. So the Germans were always like, yes, 9/11 happened and now you are going to Afghanistan and we will help you, but we stay in the north, there's less fighting. But the Danes were always like full in. It's a small country, but the Danes, whatever was coming from the US, the Danes embraced it. No matter who was President, Obama or Bush, they just were like all in. And now Denmark has decided about the biggest defense package for decades, the small country of Denmark, so even the big defense package, it's a small package compared to what US or maybe also Germany could do. Yeah. But the interesting thing is, it's completely American free. No American technique in it. It's only European and other countries that delivering to it. The Danes. So, I mean, this is, I think, due to the Greenland issue. Now, they are afraid that when the White House is completely demolished, the interest of Donald Trump will turn to Greenland again, and then maybe they have a problem. But now is our relationship intact becomes concrete, really concrete.
Yeah,
and
so we didn't talk about trade and the importance of that, and we won't right now. But it is a problem when the Danes don't want to have a policy of not buying American. I want to turn the table, because we got to turn the tables here so we can also get to some of your questions. But I have a couple of other things that I want to cover. So if you know anything about German culture, and I can't claim to be an expert, but I learned a lot in my years as ambassador, traveling all over the country. There are vast differences around the country, like there are vast differences in the US. But there are some really clear cultural attributes of Germans. So it's a beautiful sunny day today. If I said that in Germany, and I did, sometimes it's a gorgeous day, the answer, the reply will be invariably, but it's going to rain tomorrow. The Germans are pessimists. It's not a coincidence that the word Angst is German in origin. So, but we want to turn the tables in this Perry World House, and I want you to be the optimist so I can talk. I want you to tell this wonderful group what gives you hope, and I want to be able to say
so
what keeps me up at night. After all, my name is Gutmann. But seriously, I think it's important because the good part of American optimism, so I want to just tell you why I enjoyed being the optimist in Germany, is whenever I would say, they would say, there's a crisis, you know, how can you deal with this? And I say, every crisis is an opportunity. You all can build up your military strength. You can build up your economy. We can trade more with one another. And everybody, if it was a journalist roundtable, they would say, that's so American of you, right? So you be the optimist for a change. What gives you hope, Robert?
It's a little bit unfair, I have to say, but first of all, we used this crisis actually, and there's there's the saying, the Churchill saying, never let a good crisis go to waste. There's some truth in it, of course, because then people want real action, and also our collaboration, what we achieved together was driven by this feeling of crisis, and suddenly things you could, for a politician like me, these years were like a nightmare, the sheer horror, and maybe the best time I had in office.
Oh, okay,
so, right?
Good.
Because
I was hoping
because you could achieve a lot of things, and now the question is, can open and liberal societies only act if there's a crisis?
Look how long it takes them to say what gives them hope. Let me just say.
The experience at Perry World House, actually. The experience, because, wait. There's, I mean it seriously,
okay.
not to be polite. There's I don't know how many rounds I had with students, but some. And I haven't noticed before, but the American students, they always end on a happy note. It's like listening to a Hollywood movie. So when the Germans are saying, but tomorrow it's going to rain, the American rhetoric is, well, no matter how hard it is, in the end, the good will prevail, and the sheriff will shoot all the villains, and so maybe also some good people, I don't know, sometimes. But this, I think you can make a decision. That gives me hope, that people, maybe the next generation, they can decide if they want to be on the optimistic or pessimistic side. And you have to see where you want to go there. If you just look down and you're sad, and you will never reach a new horizon. And I mean, this is now the first day out of Europe after being so long in government and being at the front line and politics. And the experience here was really like, there are so many, mainly young people, maybe also some older ones, but maybe mainly young people who really have an idea about their life, including their country, including values and their own freedom. And this really, I think, gives me hope.
Yeah, well, I think I agree with that, but I said I would do the pessimistic part, yes. What keeps me up at night. And I have to say, by the way, that Churchill also said, which I think is absolutely true, that as a leader, there's no use in being a pessimist. Because then you're not going to lead. You're not going to find how you can make things better. So there's a practical reason, and I believe this, because I don't think deep down I'm an optimist in the sense that I worry about everything. But if you don't see the upside, you can't lead. And so that's why I think Robert, actually, we bonded, because he was already seeing how you get out of a mess years ago. What keeps me up at night is today, and for a long time now, is I worry that so many people who are in leadership positions, in business, in the media, the press, are not standing up and speaking out about what they know is wrong, about what they know are attacks on our most basic freedoms, contractions of opportunity that this country has, at its best, has always stood for. And, you know, I believe that's true even, I think there are too few university leaders. I think there are too few leaders of business. And when you see the press, the leaders of, you know, the Washington Post and the LA Times and CBS and you name it, where they have a constitution that they can bring a case, and almost any decent constitutional lawyer will tell you that they could win their case, but they don't have the courage to do that, and the money matters more than freedom of the press, which is a First Amendment right. That's just one example, but that's what I worry about. I worry that democracies die when not enough people stand up for the freedoms and the democratic opportunities that made their lives possible. That, to me, that goes back to my, to my roots, to why I think education is so important and why it was so wonderful to be able to work with you and other people who shared those core values. If you have those core values and you know them and you have the education and in the case of leaders have the resources to stand up for them, I believe you have a duty to do so, and it's very short-sighted. So that keeps me up at night, but it also makes it important for me to speak up, and it makes me very, gives me some hope to turn the tables back, that you and others across the Atlantic will join with us to the extent that we do speak up about this. Let's just end before we take questions on your experience teaching, because both of us are teaching. For me, it's a return to teaching. I don't know if, Robert, this is probably a new experience.
It would be.
What's it like teaching Penn students?
I haven't really, it wasn't really teaching. Like, it was more discussions, I would say. I hope the students got something out of it, but it wasn't like, now you have to remember and you're writing a test and I give you grades. So everything like hardcore teaching, it was not. It was, for me, it was.
Oh, I'm doing hardcore teaching.
Yes, yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah,
I can imagine.
Loving it. Great students.
So, but for me, as I just said, it was, I hope that the students got something out of it, because I'm not an academic researcher, but I can maybe translate academic research into political problems. And I hope they got something out. For me, it was fascinating just to meet them. And then I learned one thing. Actually, here in Perry World House, we had the Climate Week. Michael Boisberg and others were among them. And maybe I can share the last experience I had. The Climate Week, they had gathered a whole bunch of clever, interesting people, like from investment companies and from journalism and from NGOs. And they said, now we're doing a role play, and you are the minister, Robert. And Coco Warner took me aside before I entered the room. I was a little bit surprised. I knew in my schedule, now I meet all these people, but I thought I'd listen to them. I relax and have a nice and easygoing morning. Suddenly they said, now we're doing a role play, and you are part of it. Okay, so I'm part of it. Then Coco Warner said to me, well, and I wanted to act like devil advocate. So whatever they're saying, you have to reject it, and for political reasons. And I was completely unprepared, but I enjoyed being minister again. It was really, so I loved it. And it was really interesting to see how academia and academic knowledge and the role I played saying, yeah, well, this is really interesting. You might be right, but it's not helping me in winning the argument in the parliament. And yes, climate action is important for the future, but the elections are in 2 weeks and I have to win the elections, otherwise there is no future for me. So forget about all the interesting figures you have. It's not working for me. So I was on their side actually, but this was really interesting, their reaction. And so maybe what I've learned is, what I will do in the future when I go to other universities is taking this role play piece and bring it into courses. So I would love to do this on a more regular basis with students to come. So I learned a lot, especially this case.
We want to get you back, and I will extend publicly an invitation for you to come to my course next year, where we do similar. We're doing a course on communication in times of crisis. Some of my students are here, and that does give me real hope for the future. So we're ready for questions.
Okay, so I have the question. Hello?
Yeah, I have one.
I have the questions, and we can just share mics. I have the questions from the audience, so we have a number of them. So I'll start with the first one about the German political party, the AfD, and the fact that Vice President Vance, Elon Musk have been very openly supportive of the party, while at home claiming to be fighting anti-Semitism while supporting a neo-Nazi party in Germany. I think probably this is to you, but either of you can weigh in.
So if you're a little bit familiar with German politics, the AfD for me, and I would argue for everyone who really looks into it, is not a normal, if there's such a thing, a normal right-wing populistic party, as we have so many in Europe and everywhere on the world right now. But they are now hardcore, you have to say. So they even in the European Parliament, where all the national parties form party groups, nobody wants to work together with them. So even Giorgia Meloni's party or the French party, which are, as you can guess, not on my side, refuse to work together with the AfD because they are really, some of them are really Nazis, I have to say it, and some of them are just repeating Russian propaganda, and they say horrible things sometimes. So I think they're really a threat for German democracy, and therefore it's astonishing, and nobody really in Germany knows how to deal with it, that the vice president of the US is encouraging this party. So whatever we would have expected, this never.
Yeah.
So, and normally governments don't interfere in internal politics. So when you are a minister, when you're a chancellor, when you're vice chancellor, when you're vice president, you deal with the ones who are elected. So when you go to Turkey, somehow you might think whatever you want, but you have to deal with Erdogan. And if you deal with Israel, you deal with the elected government as it is. If you would not accept this kind of that countries do their own free decisions about their governments, then we are in difficult times, I would say. And so, yes, well, the story is a little bit longer, actually, because now part of the government, or at least the former part of government, Elon Musk mainly, owns a lot of technique that most of the world is dependent on, like launchers for satellites or Skylink. So what if someone in Germany would decide now we are harsh on AfD, and then they stop Starlight for Europe, something like this. So this is not just a game for us, it's really a threat for defending our own democracy.
Yeah, and again, it's the only thing I would say is it's this short-sightedness on our part for economic. The only way you can make any sense of this is economically, because politically, this is the only major party in Germany that's anti-American. It is, I mean, it is pro-Russian, anti-American. So it doesn't make, you know, not everything.
Maybe this has changed a little bit since Donald Trump is in office. I don't know. Maybe they are anti-American, but pro-Trump. That could be.
That could be. I don't know. But they're not a reliable ally
but
to
this is,
the US.
I mean, this is interesting.
Let's go on to another question, though, because we don't want to get...
One remark, please.
Sure, please.
Maybe this is now, I mean, it's hard to explain what's happening in the world, but if normally I explained how governments normally work and work together and accept each other, but maybe now governmental politics becomes party politics. See what I mean? That the president, the chancellor, whoever it is not representing his country, but his party in government. And then, of course, the alliances are completely mixed up, because then they love their counterparties in other countries and don't accept other governments, which is completely unknown, I would say, in diplomacy.
Yeah. No, I think that's actually a trend that we're observing.
So the next question is about German military spending and investment. So obviously there's a history with German military that the US and Germany have worked to move past. And how can Germany, NATO, increase or spend more on their military in terms of countering Russia? And what are the conversations like when you were ambassador about that issue, given the history especially?
Well, when Amy was ambassador, but you can tell that from your side, the financial situation was completely different, because we had a very, in Germany, we means Germany now, we had a very rigid, tight debt break. So we were only allowed to spend the money we take in, and the balance should always be, the budget should always be balanced. Then we made at that time, big step forward. We took 100 billion euros for defense investments, and they were spent like in a minute. Now the new government is in a completely different situation. They could spend as much as they want. So this, I would have, now new problems are there, but I would love to have their problems, spending as much money as you want. That, I mean, my government broke because we couldn't agree on 7 billion euros, and now they got like 700 billion euros, maybe more. And they, from my point of view, the question is now, do they spend the money wisely for defense? Wisely means not as in the past decades, because the warfare has completely changed. Now, you can imagine that you can order and then buy and then store 100 shoot of artillery ammunition. You just put it in some garage or whatever. But storing 100,000 drones for 10 years or so is just ridiculous. So we need capacity to produce as fast as we can huge amounts of technical equipment, but not have it. And that is the big difference. It's more like a vaccine. It makes no sense to produce a vaccine for the next flu and score it for 20 years, but you need the capacity. So I doubt and I hope, I would say, that the military side has understood that something else, this is now a new, like party politics and governments, it's a new thinking. And this is the question. Money question is solved for Germany.
Yeah, I would just say that another important goal in international diplomacy for the US, and it was another one of my highest goals, was to get our allies, Germany being at the top of the list, to contribute their full capacity to NATO defense. We had a commitment of 2%, and Germany was below it, but by the time I left as ambassador, Germany had slightly exceeded its mark of 2%, and given the wars in the world that were not anticipated, we, the US, and we, the world of democracies, need the greater investment that Germany is doing wisely. Robert is absolutely right. You have to do this wisely. You can invest in military defense that you can never use. So it has to be.
It takes too long. I mean, I was in.
That's another problem, which is it takes a decade minimum to get up, the kinds of defense artillery that we need. In the case of supporting Ukraine, we had a shortage of ammunition. Everybody liked to talk about the Abrams and the Leopards and what people like to talk about the big things. But ammunition, we didn't have enough ammunition, and the way we structured buying arms is not the way we buy anything else in the world. In other words, in order to get ammunition, you had to have a contract that was paid ahead of time before any company would move. And that's not the way to work a military in times of crises that happen so quickly. So there's a lot of work to be done here, and I think Germany is now much wiser, and I'm not sure, I'm worried that the US is compensating in the other direction of being less wise about how we think about the importance of coordinating our military forces.
We had a couple questions around the same issue that clearly you two both had a close working relationship and trusted each other. How integral is trust to the relationship, and what happens when the position of ambassador is vacant, like it is right now? How does that impact the work that you're talking about?
Those of you who have watched The Diplomat should know it is mostly fiction, but the one among several facts about it is having an ambassador is important to the country that you have an ambassador in. Most countries want the US to have an ambassador because an ambassador, so what there is now in Germany is a chargé. He's somebody I had hired as my deputy. Those of you who, you're all watching The Diplomat, so you know what a DCM is. It's the provost of the equivalent of a provost. And so my DCM is, who I hired at the very end, we only overlapped for about a week, is now the chargé. The chargé is not the president's personal representative. Now, Germany might be relieved not to have the president's personal representative in Germany. However, it isn't a sign of respect for the country not to have an ambassador stationed there. And so far, we haven't heard anything about that. Being the president's personal ambassador in Germany, let me just give you an example of what that means, just practically speaking. We desperately wanted to get Evan Gershkowitz, the Wall Street Journal reporter, Paul Whelan, and several other political prisoners in Russia out. This was just a horror in very clear terms. And what I could do as ambassador is go directly to the chancellor. Why would I need to go to the Chancellor of Germany to help get these people out of Russia? Because Germany had a Russian asset in the name of Krasnikov, who was a terrible murderer. In daylight, in the Tiergarten, he murdered. He committed just cold-blooded murder. He was the only key for us of getting these people out, and Germany had to put him in play. They, remember before that, there was Navalny, right? And so we started with Navalny, and when Navalny died, while we were at the Munich Security Conference, and his widow spoke in front of us at the Munich Security Conference, we had, at that point, thought, oh my gosh, this is a horror, and the deal is over. But the deal wasn't over because of, and this goes full circle, because of the trust and the friendship that Olaf Scholz and Joe Biden had developed. And they didn't know each other before, but they knew each other's governments, and they knew they could be trusted. And your government, when I went to them in very secret terms, none of my staff even knew. So I had to, I had to do it in a way that my staff didn't know. When I tried it out on Wolfgang and others, said it's going to have to be a president to chancellor conversation. And I could convey that, and I spoken to, not asking the chancellor. I didn't have the chutzpah to do that. I shouldn't have done that. But I could be a behind-the-scenes mediator. There's no way a chargé can do that. So having an ambassador is super important on our side, and that indication of trust, I would say it's invaluable, but that word doesn't capture it, because what it did was it enabled us to save the lives of people who, fast forward to a few weeks ago, and Michael, my husband, and I were at a reception for Evan and his family in New York. The Wall Street Journal invited those of us who had helped in this case, and almost no American knows what I'm telling you, but I can tell it to you because it's in Wall Street Journal articles and other articles, that if it weren't for Germany and his government, those people wouldn't be alive.
And Navalny is dead.
What?
Navalny
Yeah,
is dead. I guess it's fair to say that maybe he was murdered because otherwise he would be part of the deal, or the deal hadn't happened. So
Mary? We should just you can say the last words, but I really do have to thank you once again and ask you to thank Robert Habeck.
Yes. Only say thank you and enjoy the day.
There you go.
Thank you very much.